Welcome, everybody, to today's workshop all about garage storage. My name is Robin Riebel, and I am joined today by my partner,
Mike.
Mike, and we are going to go ahead and talk about everything you need to know about organizing and kind of streamlining your garage.
So the first thing we want to do is just go over an agenda and give you an idea of what we'll be covering today. First of all, we're going to start with how to define your space, getting an idea of how much space you have, what's available, and where you want things to fit into your garage. Next, we're going to go over all different types of storage solutions. There are so many options out there that are so versatile, and there absolutely is something for everybody. You can make these systems work because you can design them to kind of fit your needs specifically. We're also going to cover the basics of installation. A lot of these systems don't really require installation, but even the ones that do it, there's a lot of similarities and it's not overly complicated. It really is something just about anybody can do. And then we're going to give some tips on organizing by using bins and some other options.
Now, one thing you want to think about before you purchase any storage is to go ahead and define your space. You have a limited amount of space in your garage. So how do you want to use it? Are you going to park in there? Do you need a workshop area in there? Do you just need a lot of storage or things for sporting equipment? So really think about how you want to utilize that space. And I think it's really important. This is the perfect time to kind of clean out that garage, reassess everything you have, maybe donate some stuff, get rid of some stuff, kind of pare down everything that's in your garage. Because I know I have a bunch of hidden stuff that I don't know how long it's been in my garage.
Right. I was just going to add to that. And you know who you are, but if you're one of those folks who not only can't get their car in the garage, they can't get themselves in the garage. There's just too much stuff. Truth is, there really is no system that can allow you to organize all that stuff. There's just too much. Right. So like Robin said, it really is important to take this opportunity to declutter, maybe make some donations. There's probably things in there that are going to be good for someone, maybe not for you because you forgot you even owned it. It's been buried in there for so long. But if you can get rid of the stuff you don't need, it'll make it easier to organize the stuff that you do need.
So, garages really have multiple purposes. Like I said, parking, storage, all of those, holiday decorations that you might have. Those are all things that you really want to consider, right? So considerize that space. Prioritize what is the most important use for your garage. Is it to park or is it to make sure you have that workshop space? Because if you can't fit everything, like Mike said, even after you declutter, you're going to have to prioritize what's most important to you to make the space work for you.
Right. And give some thought, like Robin said, too. If you want to use it as a workshop, but you also need storage, you can plan for both of those, but you've also got to plan for, the maneuverability. If you put in a workshop, but it's crammed in there with all this other stuff and you can't really functionally use it, it's not going to do you much good. So give some thought to all the things you need to do and then allot space to each of those things in your garage. Prioritize, like Robin said. But you can also, map out your space. Again, give some thoughts to what you need, what you want to add, because you might not have a lot of storage systems in your garage. You've got to plan for that, obviously. If you want some space for a workshop, you've got to plan for that. So you can kind of map that out, visualize what you want, think about the options that are out there for each of those solutions and how much space you want to dedicate to that solution. And kind of map that out, measure it out. You can use some tape to kind of measure it out. You can do a drawing to really be honest about how much space you need for each of these things, how much space is required for it to be functional and useful, and then and kind of use that to decide more of this, less of that.
Right. I really like the idea of using your tape measure and painter's tape on the floor because it gives you a really good visual of how much space you're actually going to have. So, if you measure out the space for shelving units and you also want to park, do you have enough room to walk between your car and the shelves? So instead of having to move all that stuff around, instead of having to move it all around, if you lay it out with that painter's tape on the floor, it gives you a really good live workable model of how that space is going to work for you.
Right. And one thing you'll notice as we talk about all of these systems, the great thing about all of them is that there are so many ways to configure them. Even with the wall cabinet systems that we'll talk about, the track systems, the shelving, they all come in different configurations and sizes, and you can mix and match. A lot of them come as an entire, system that you can purchase all together, but you can also purchase individual parts and make it work for you. So if you need a lot of vertical storage, you can do that. The track systems, you can add to them. You can start small and add to them as you go. So the fact that you can kind of customize all of these systems really makes them great. Even if you go through the process and you don't make all your decisions, that's okay. You can start with bits and parts and maybe add on to them. Maybe you have budgetary constraints. You can't get everything you want, but at least put together a plan that works for your space and then kind of build on it as you can.
So you can get everything, like Mike said, from simple shelves, right? Just plain shelving units, right? You could get permanently affixed things like cabinets that are attached to the walls, or you can get portable systems that you can move around the garage, make it a little bit easier for you to work with. So looking at those defined spaces, choose the storage that's going to work with you. Like Mike said, mix, match, do all those things. Nobody says you have to have all the same. If you like all the same, that's great, but there's nothing wrong with mixing and matching your systems to utilize every square inch that you can so that you get the maximum use out of that.
And, Robin mentioned portable. There's a lot of these systems that are, storage boxes on wheels. You can move those around. But even things like shelving units, the steel ones are pretty heavy, but you can still move them. They're not affixed necessarily unless you decide to attach it to the wall for security. But there's plastic shelving that doesn't weigh much of anything. Those are easily moved. The reason I bring that up, if you're new to your home and you've got a pretty good idea of what you're trying to do, but you don't want to necessarily commit to storage cabinets attached to the wall. What if you put them in and you don't like where they are or they're not what you need? You can start with some of these other systems that are movable. Once you leave it there for a while and decide, no, that works for me. I want storage there, but maybe I want something a little more robust. Then maybe you can come back and add some cabinets. But again, there's so much flexibility built into these systems that you really have a lot of options, which is great. Now, one of the first systems we want to talk about is a wall track system. These systems are so cool because A, they are super simple to install. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but you have a lot of options as far as what you can store on them. It's really a small footprint. Depending on how many of them you have and the space that you have, it's literally just a track that's on the wall and all sorts of different hooks attached to it, allowing you to, again, customize it for whatever you need. And there are specific kinds of hooks for different things. But as far as the footprint, it can be as small or as large as you want it. Not only can you expand it left to right, but you can add different tracks up and down, again, depending on your space. But there's just so many options for that. But there's different types. There is a track system like this. We'll talk about this later, but this is from Rubbermaid. This is the fast track system. This track actually attaches to the wall, really easy to install. But like I said, all of these different hook types, there's tons of these. Some just literally hang on the track. Some of them lock in. Like this one has a lock, so it locks in place. It's a little more secure. But that's the track system. But there's also panel systems.
Yeah, there's really great panel systems where it's an actual panel that hangs on your wall. And then there's a variety of things that clip into it. So if you look at like this section behind us, there's hooks, just like the Rubbermaid system had. There's different like shelves. These can house your power tools. There's different bins. So there's a variety of things that can hook into those as well. And if you're not interested in like a full panel system, you can always go the traditional pegboard system, very much like you see behind us on the sides here, where it's the old pegboard system where you can get a variety of pegs and hooks and baskets and things that will hook onto those as well. So these are all what we kind of consider those wall or track systems that utilize both your vertical space as well as horizontal space. Use that wall space.
And like Robin said, pegboards have been around forever. These other systems are kind of taking that same idea to the next level.
Right.
They're maybe a little bit more sturdy than a traditional pegboard. And again, a lot of options. But the cool thing is all of the additional hooks and things that you add to them, You can move those as needed. You can slide them back and forth. You can move them up and down. You can rearrange things easily. All of that stuff that you probably currently have in the floor of your garage is now up off of the floor. It's on the wall. You can see it. So if you're tired of digging through a pile of lawn tools to get a specific one, now you look on the wall, you see all of your lawn tools, and you can just go get the one that you need. So easy access, easy visibility. It's just such a good option because, again, it is so versatile. Another thing about the Rubbermaid system that we talked about, each of the rails can hold up to 1,750 pounds. You know, it's a relatively small thing. You wouldn't think necessarily it can hold that much, but it can. But it can hold so many different things: sports equipment, lawn equipment, bicycles. Like Robin said with this one, there are baskets that hang, so you can put whatever you need there. Again, we'll say it a million times, versatility.
That Rubbermaid system actually has shelf standards, and you can put wire shelves on that as well, all hanging off of that main track. So it does. You can have all types of storage just with that main track system. Now, there are a couple of things that you want to be aware of, right? When you're looking at systems like this, like Mike said, you can see everything, which can be a positive, but the negative side, you can see everything, right? Sometimes that can get a little bit messy when all your stuff is out. You got to make sure everything is kind of hung up neatly. It doesn't hide anything. The other concern that you might have is maybe that height, right? Sometimes if you're going to use all of that space, are you going to be able to reach the things that are real high, or are you going to need a step stool or something to get up to those higher ones? When you are hanging these systems, you have to make sure that they're anchored properly. You're going to need to be into the studs within your garage, or if you have a concrete garage, make sure you're using the appropriate masonry anchors. Attaching them into drywall is not going to be enough.
Right. And that's a good point, because those weight suggestions are assuming that you have installed it correctly. So you can't just stick it in the drywall and put something heavy and expect it to stay. And another thing to talk about as far as it looking messy, what happens to some people, they may start with one track, but they try to put everything up there. So on one hook, you've got 15 different things. You've just transferred your pile from the floor to the wall. That's not really the thing you want to do. So again, you can just simply add other tracks and spread that stuff out, but it's easy to fix the messiness if you just have enough up there.
Now, in addition to those rack systems, which are amazing, we have the ever tried and true, probably the most popular choice, are shelving units. You know, shelving units are great to have. They are super easy to assemble. You don't have to hang them on the wall, right? So you don't necessarily have to worry about studs or anything like that. You can get them in a ton of different sizes, colors, materials, from steels to plastics, depending on what you want to store on those shelves. They can be a relatively inexpensive option. That's usually if you're not sure what you need for storage or you're just getting into the storage game. Shelves are a great way, because if you decide you want to replace them later, you haven't invested a fortune in them, right? They can be portable. So if you're in a place temporarily, maybe you're renting for a time being, you can take the shelving units with you. They're not attached to anything. They're not installed permanently. Now, like we said, depending on the types that you get, if you get the steel, like our Husky steel support ones, they can take anywhere from 1,800 to 2,500 pounds per shelf. You can do a lot of weight on those things. So if you're storing heavy things, equipment, things like that, heavy storage boxes, they'll take it. Now, the plastic ones, they're going to support a little bit less. They're going to go about 150 pounds per shelf, maybe about 750 pounds for the whole unit. Make sure you're reading the ratings on the package when you buy a shelving unit to ensure that you're getting something that's sturdy enough for what you want to hold.
Right. Even the plastic ones, you might not expect a plastic shelving unit to hold 750 pounds. That's pretty impressive. You don't want to go over that, but that's probably more than most people think. But if you need, you can do a mixture, obviously. You can do the steel one for the really heavy things that you need, and maybe the plastic ones for the lighter things. But again, like I said, versatility. We're going to say that a lot today.
Right.
Some of the things to be aware of. These do take up space on your floor. So it's less space than all your stuff on the floor, but you still got to plan out the space that that unit's actually going to take up. And like Robin said earlier, you've got to make sure that you've got room around that so you're not having a hard time getting out of your car because now you're organized, but you're stuck in your car because you can't get out.
Right.
Weight limitations, again, you got to really think about what you plan to store. And not just that, but how many units you have room for and how many you need. If you really decide the shelving unit is the best option for you, give some thought to what you're going to fit in there, and that will help you decide how many you need as long as you have space for them. You know, the steel ones can be pretty heavy and bulky to move and to get into the garage in the first place. But again, the actual building of the unit is really simple. We'll talk about installation a little bit later.
Yeah.
They really just snap together. They're very easy.
Super easy to do that. Now, if you really want a full custom look, like you don't want to buy pre-purchased units, you can build wooden shelving units, and that way you can customize them specifically to your space. And those are usually relatively easy to build. When you do homemade or wooden shelving units, most of the time with those, you're going to have solid shelves. A lot of like our steel storage shelving units are going to have open or grated shelves. And those are things you might want to consider. What are you going to store on there? So if I'm storing a bunch of like canned goods and things like that, are the grates so big that things are going to fall through?
Right.
Maybe I want a solid shelf. So that's another thing to consider is what do those shelves look like? Are they solid? Are they vented? And vented may be good for other things because you have that airflow through them, which is really, really good.
One thing to keep in mind, if you do get the steel rack and you do have those spaces in there, you can always put a piece of plywood down, just something to fill that in.
Sure.
But again, you're not changing the shelving unit itself, but you're just adding a level of security to keep things from falling through. Now, the next category we want to talk about are cabinets. Cabinets are a great option because it's going to provide you a storage solution. But, you know, we talked about the fact that with the track systems, you see everything. The great thing about the cabinets is you don't see everything. In fact, you don't see anything if it's locked in the cabinet. There are varieties that hang on the wall. There are varieties that just literally are freestanding. Again, a little bit portable if that's, you know, an issue for you.
Right.
You can do anything from a full-size pantry. You can do workbenches, tool chests, a variety of styles and colors like we mentioned before. The great thing about the cabinets, you can get an entire system, almost like a whole room of solutions that come together. But the other thing is you can buy them individually as pieces and again, kind of build up to your ultimate dream solution. Or even if you get one of the kind of made units that comes with a lot of different, you know, parts and pieces, you can always add to that because those pieces are sold individually. So again, depending on your space and your size, you can go as small or as large as you need. Individual parts or just the whole system. The most common material that they're made out of is steel, so they're very durable. They have locks most of the time on the doors, so you can keep things nice and secure. You can integrate them with one of the systems that we talked about. A lot of these, you know, there might be a workbench in the middle surrounded by the cabinets, but that's going to leave a section of wall behind there. You can put a panel system back there. So you're hanging your tools that you need right there on your work surface, and they're all within reach, right there on the wall. Easy to see, easy to utilize. But just so many options again. A lot of them come pre-assembled. Some require some assembly, but most of them come pre-assembled.
Right. Now, there's, again, a couple of things that you really want to think about when you're thinking about these big cabinet systems. First of all, they are very heavy. So they do come pre-assembled. They are very heavy. So you're going to want to make sure that you have enough people around to install them, get them off the truck, you know, get them on the truck, things like that. Because they are so large, that's another thing I mentioned, the truck, right? You're going to either have to have them delivered or you're going to have a large vehicle or even maybe rent one of Home Depot's load and goes to get these home because they are very large systems. So you are going to have a vehicle large enough to get them home or have them delivered to you. Now, occasionally you may have to build parts of them as well. You know, they are really great. They give you a really good, clean, custom look. Also have to be aware of that too. Just like seeing everything is kind of not always a great thing. Hiding everything is not always a great thing because it kind of leads to, oh, just throw it in there and shut the door, right? Yeah. And then I don't have to look at it again. So definitely you can find things that will fit, you know, your budget, your style, and your needs. What I really like, and you were talking about lockability. You know, again, if you have small children at home and you have a lot of chemicals in your garage, cleaning chemicals, paints, things like that. You can put them in one of these really nice cabinets. They're safe, they're secure, you can lock them, and you don't have to worry about anybody, either children or pets, getting into anything like antifreeze or something like that. It's all locked away nice and safe.
But there's also a lot of neat things built into these cabinets. Some of the doors have pegboard, so that's an additional place to store stuff. A lot of them have extra outlets kind of built in. If you can't necessarily reach an outlet, you can reach one within the unit itself. A lot of the cabinets have holes in the back, grommets that you can knock out, run, a power strip through and connect it to the wall behind the cabinet. So you don't have to worry about access to that outlet, but now you've got power coming from that outlet within the cabinet itself. The other cool thing to know about, you talked about picking them up. These are large, but these companies do a great job of thinking about how to kind of, package them within themselves.
Right.
So if you buy a unit that comes with 5 or 6 different cabinets, you won't be picking up necessarily 5 or 6 cabinets. You'll have 1 or 2 large ones, and when you open it, there's 2 smaller ones not built, but stored inside and shipped inside. So a lot of times it's not as big as you might think based on the size of the system that you purchased, but they do a really good job of safely kind of packing them within each other, which saves you a lot of space when you're trying to pick them up and deliver them or move them to your house.
Absolutely. Now, another thing that a lot of people don't think about is overhead storage. What about all of that space above you? Overhead storage is a great way to repurpose that almost wasted space. It's fantastic for like seasonal items, things you only have to get to a couple of times a year, all that stuff that you really don't need daily. Maybe you put your patio accessories up there in the winter and your holiday decorations up there in the summer. It adds usable space and still allows you to park underneath it. So, you have all of that height, utilize it. It's really a great feature. And those overhead storage units can hold up to about 800 pounds. So that is a lot of storage above your head. But again, you want to make sure that it is installed properly. It's got to be attached to those ceiling joists to allow for that weight. So it's going to hold everything while you're putting all your storage up there.
Now, if you're thinking, I've got a really big car, I've got an SUV, I've got a tall vehicle, you can still utilize these systems because most of them are adjustable as far as the height. So if you think, I don't really have a ton of space above my car, maybe you can put it on the side of your car where that's not an issue. But even if it is, you can always raise it up. It will limit the amount of space you have for storage, but you're still utilizing some of that space and ensuring that you can still put your car in the garage.
Right. And even, it comes down a little bit lower. So it's over what would be the hood of your car. That's still a lot of space between the hood of your car and the ceiling. And since they are adjustable, you could pull in so that your storage is here and the hood of your car goes underneath it without damaging your car and still being able to utilize that space. When you're trying to get the most out of your storage, you want to think about every square inch that you can squeeze out of your garage, right?
Yeah, and the less decluttering you did at the beginning, the more important that is at this point.
Very true.
Now, Robin, we've talked a lot about how these have to be installed and connected to a stud. I think people can understand why that makes sense. A wood stud that's holding up your house is obviously more sturdy than a piece of drywall. Right. That makes sense. But if you've never done this and you've never used a stud finder and you've never really located a stud that you can't see in the wall, let's talk a little bit about that process for how they do that.
Sure. So a couple of things to go over first. Now, most of your wood framed homes, those are going to have your studs, okay? You're going to have studs in the wall, and in the ceiling, they're called joists, okay? So it's pretty much the same thing, but they're spaced a little bit different. Most studs are spaced about what they call 16 inches on center. And if you look at a tape measure, you can see they actually mark out where your studs should be, right? They'll have little diamonds there or little red marks at the 16 inch. So you can tell where your studs are. So that's pretty much average. Sometimes it could be as much as 24, but usually 16 is the standard.
Real quick, Robin, the on center, if you've never heard that term, what does that mean? It means the center of one stud measuring over to the center of the next stud. So that's what the 16 inches on center means. You're going from the center of a stud, which is where you want to make your connection,
Yes.
to the center of another stud.
Exactly. Now, as far as your joists go, and this holds true if we're talking about ceiling joists or floor joists, they're both called joists. Those are just over 19 inches on center. It's like 19 and 3/16. These will also be marked out on your tape measure as well. They'll put like a little diamond there of where your joists are within any tape measure. So you want to make sure that you are finding those. Now, in order to find those, one of the best tools that you can use is a stud finder. And there are a variety of different types of stud finders. You can get magnetic ones, electronic ones. You can even get ones that are so advanced that they'll actually find the pipes and the wires behind your wall. But a standard stud finder, like the one here, they're super easy to use. They are electronic. All you have to do, turn it on. It'll beep when you push the little button. It'll beep and kind of give you a little flashing light. You're going to press and hold the button on the side while you slowly scan across the wall. And when it catches the edge of the stud, you'll see it'll light up. And in the front of the stud finder, there's a little notch. You just take your pencil and mark that little notch. All right. And then continue with the button still pressed, continue to slide. And when it gets to the other side of the stud, that light will go out. So you kind of maybe slide it back, find that other side of the slide, mark it in the notch, and the space in the middle between those two marks is going to be the center of your stud. Now, you can also double check once you find the center of your stud. You can get something like a nail or an awl and just kind of tap it with a hammer right in the center. Drywall is about a half an inch thick. So if you go in about a half an inch and then it stops or you meet with a lot of resistance, that means you're in the stud and you've actually found the stud. And you can go ahead and pull that back out. So that's just a great way to check that.
One other small detail to keep in mind, when you're using the stud finder, just make sure that it's actually touching the wall.
Yes.
I've seen people try to use it where they're just kind of scanning around. It has to be touching the wall to be really effective and to detect the edges of that 2x4.
Yeah, you have to have it right on that wall and kind of just scan it back and forth, slide it back and forth. I usually try it a couple of different times to make sure. I always double check myself. I'll come in from one side, mark it, and then I'll just start over again from the other side, make sure that my marks wind up at about the same spot, and then test for the center. Now, if your garage has brick walls or concrete walls, you don't have to worry about finding a stud, but you do have to use the appropriate anchors for that. You need to use masonry anchors. Something like a Tapcon is a great masonry anchor. A lot of times, you'll have to drill first before using those. So you may need a masonry drill bit. The Tapcons, I know a lot of them actually come with the correct bit. So you're sure you're using the right size drill bit for the right size concrete anchor. So those are a really great feature as well. But that gives you a little more versatility if you have those concrete walls, because you don't have to worry about finding a stud. You can go in anywhere.
The other thing to think about, we talked about maybe doing a second pass just to make sure that you found the studs. Remember that 16-inch on center. If you find one and you're going along and they're all measuring out to 16 inches, you're on track. If you suddenly get one that's like 5, either you're near the end of the wall and you run into an extra, stud, or if you're in the middle of the wall, you're probably off. You probably hit something else. So that's another way to make sure that you're on track, is to make sure that you're on 16 inches apart as you mark the center of those studs.
Right, that's really important. So that's why it's good to know what that measurement is for sure.
Now let's talk a little bit about installation. We'll start with the easiest, and that's shelving. Just freestanding shelving units. Like Robin said earlier, the most important part about this is that they're level. Because as you probably know, your garage floor or wherever you're using these things isn't necessarily perfectly level, and it needs to be in order for the shelf to be level. If it's not, and in a lot of cases it won't be, you need to make the shelf level. You might have to add some shims, like if you've got a plastic shelf that doesn't have the feet. I think some of them do, but if they don't, you can add shims to maybe make a small difference up. And like Robin also said, I believe earlier, you can also attach them at the top on the wall. If they're really sturdy and the floor is really level, it's very unlikely you're going to tip. But
Sure.
if you want to be sure, like you said, if you've got kids or animals, or if you've got a lot of heavy things on there, you might want to secure it to the wall just to make sure that it's not going to tip at any point.
Right. Now, that's also going to help prevent collapsing as long as it's level, because it makes sure that your weight is balanced evenly across that shelving unit. If that shelving unit is kind of off and one leg is a little bit off and you start loading it up, it can actually affect the structure of the shelf, especially if you're using some of those plastic shelves. We were talking about most of the shelves now. There's no nuts. The steel shelves, there's no nuts, there's no bolts, there's no screws, no tools. They literally snap together. So, you'll put the uprights in and you'll snap in the shelves. The shelves are fully adjustable, so you can decide how far apart you want them, and you just kind of snap them in. Now, some of the plastic ones, those will definitely snap together. They may not be as adjustable as the steel ones. They may have set shelves, but again, no tools required, just snap them together. Some you may need, screws and bolts to put together, but most of the modern ones today, it's super easy. They just snap right into place, which makes them, again, easy to take apart if you have to move them, or if you want to change the spacing of the shelves.
Right. Now, this is one of those things where you might want to have a buddy helping you out, a friend, because even the plastic ones, they're not heavy. But I've put one of those plastic shelves together before, and you've got a base, which is the lowest shelf. The supports for the next shelf just really slide into holes in the bottom one. But you've got to keep them all, upright and level in order to put the next shelf on top, because they have to align with the holes on the bottom of the second shelf. And sometimes that can be frustrating. So as easy as it is to put those together, and there's no weight really involved, it's nice to have a friend. And of course, the steel shelves are heavier and they're usually bigger, especially if you get the really broad ones. You really want to have a friend. You can probably manage to do it by yourself. It's going to be a lot easier if you've got a helper. But again, like Robin said, they just snap together. The other difference in the plastic and the steel, most of the plastic ones, you've got the set support, and the height is going to be whatever it is. On the steel ones, there are holes and different connection points along the support, so you can connect those shelves in a lot of different places and make those shelves whatever height you need them to be.
Yeah, and change them. So as your needs change and grow, maybe those heights need to change depending on the stuff that you have. Now, when you're talking about cabinets, when we're talking about installing those cabinet systems, very similar to the shelves, you're really going to want to make sure that those are level as well. Again, for stability, for those doors and drawers to open properly, everything needs to be stable and level. If it's off, it may kind of adjust the frame a little bit, and your doors and your drawers may not open properly if it's not level. So those you definitely want to make sure have a nice level surface as well. But again, a lot of them also have those adjustable feet. So if your garage slopes a little bit, because some garages are actually made to slope so that anything that happens, everything kind of rolls out of the garage. So you want to make sure that you are those are level and even on the ground.
And the level is even more important with the cabinet systems. If you purchase one of those systems, if you get one of the complete systems that has several different cabinets, they've got to align, right? So if you hang the first one up, it's a little off, and then you have a freestanding cabinet, a taller cabinet next to it, it's going to be really obvious because that one's not going to be off. So it's really important to get them level so that they all, match up and align.
And I think that's what a lot of people, they'll start lining things up and they'll be like, oh, it's close. It's only off by a little bit. But the larger the system is and the more pieces you connect, that little off kind of gets amplified down the line.
Now, we've talked about several times the fact that most of these systems attach to studs. It's the same with this. I said a lot of these systems have a lot of similarities. Cabinets are the same. The only difference is most of these wall cabinets have sort of a cleat bar system. There's a bar that goes on the wall attached to studs, and then there's a place on the cabinet where it sits up and rests on that cleat. So it's easy. You might think, wow, am I going to have to hold the cabinet up and measure? No, all you've got to really worry about is the fact that that cleat is level and secure. Once you do that, the cabinet is obviously going to be level and secure. You can also sometimes secure the actual cabinet to at the bottom to the wall, so it's not only attached on the cleat; it's attached at the bottom as well.
Right.
One issue that people run into sometimes, there are multiple points on these cleats and on the cabinets to attach them to the studs. But the assumption is that you're going to center them on the studs so that there's equal connection points in all of the cabinets. What if you decide you want yours a little off and they just don't perfectly align with the studs? What you might run into is the first cabinet has a couple of points, but they're not really centered. The second one has 2 points, but they're even less centered. When you get to the third cabinet, you may only be aligning with one stud. That's not enough. You need at least 2 on these cabinets. So what do you do in that case? You can't move the studs in the wall.
Right.
You don't necessarily want to move the cabinets because you've decided this is the only place they're going to work for me.
Yeah.
What do? Here's a perfect solution. A lot of people do this. Find the studs, decide where they're going to go, find the studs, and then attach a 2x4 to the studs. That way you can attach this 2x4, and it can be as long as you need it to be, obviously, but you can attach that to every single stud. That is going to be really nice and secure, and it's level because you've already checked that. That way, instead of attaching the cabinets to the studs in the wall, think of this extra 2x4 as a horizontal stud, basically. It's connected to the studs in the wall. You're now connecting the cabinets to something that is sturdy and connected to the studs. So it's going to be secure, it's going to be level, but it solves that issue where you're not quite aligning with your studs, but now you fix that by adding your own stud to your wall.
Right. That makes all the difference in the world so that you can get the most level and balanced connection points. Because like I said, especially with these cabinets, level and balanced is what's going to have them perform properly and is also going to hold that weight. You know, we talked about all of that weight that they can handle. They can only handle it if they are attached properly. So, you know, you want to make sure that you have those really sturdy connections. Now, like we said, there's a lot of extras with these cabinets. You have those locked doors, you have those outlets, the USB ports, you have workbenches. Like this behind us is actually a workbench. It's got a ton of drawers in it. It has outlets on the side. So I can plug this workbench into one outlet, and I've got a power strip built right into the side that has 5 or 6 outlets in it. So if I'm running my tools or things like that out in the garage, I have everything. As Mike said earlier, you have those integrated pegboards on doors. You can get adjustable shelves. Some of them have under cabinet lighting, or you can install under cabinet lighting in them, either battery powered or running the power through those open grommets in the back that we mentioned for cord access. Some of them have soft close or self-closing drawers, right? So for all of your storage, many of them have different heights in drawers. You could get the very, very shallow ones for tools, all the way up to really deep drawers in the bottom that'll hold all of your biggest power tools like circular saws and things like that right into that workbench to keep everything nice and tight.
Now, when it comes to the installation of the track systems, we had mentioned how easy it is. I want to walk you through the steps so you can see that it really is a very simple and short process. The first and most important thing, like we said several times, is to locate and mark your studs. Then you want to level the track. That's what's actually going to be attached to the wall. Use a level to make sure that that's really level and mark the holes that are in the track where they align with the studs. So you align that track with the marks you've placed on the location of your studs. Then you want to drill some pilot holes on those marks and then screw in the steel rail to the wall. So that's nice and sturdy. There is a covering that kind of covers up the track so you don't really see that. It gives it a nice kind of clean, finished, streamlined kind of look. And then you just hang your accessories and hooks on there. Very, very easy process.
Right. And the same thing holds true really for those panel systems as well. They do have, instead of having a variety of holes like the track system has, they do have holes at set places that are designed to line up with your studs within the wall. So you just want to make sure you're finding the stud points to attach those systems to in order to hang them and get them in a nice sturdy position. Again, if you're going on to masonry, then you don't really have to worry about it. Just make sure you're using those correct masonry anchors as well. Let's talk a little bit about that whole organization. right? How are you going to organize all of the stuff? You went ahead, you decluttered, you donated, you've gotten rid of stuff. What are you going to do to organize what's left?
One of the best ways, and the way that most of us are probably familiar with, are bins and totes.
They're the greatest.
They're the greatest because a lot of them have wheels. A lot of them have handles. You can move them around. Lockable lids. So even bins and totes, as simple as they seem, they've come a long way, and there's a lot of different options and different kind of, ways that they're built to make them more useful. Some of them are clear. And that way, if you're in a hurry and you're looking around, you know that all your electrical cords and extension cords are in a bin. You can see them. You don't have to look through every bin. So that's one option. We mentioned a label maker. You can label these things. You can always pull those off and change those as needed.
Sure.
You can use a Sharpie to write on the side. You can put a piece of tape and write if you don't have a label maker.
Right.
Put a piece of masking tape and just write it on there. You can always obviously take that off.
Right. Masking tape, duct tape is good because it'll hold up to the elements.
Absolutely.
Like that, right on it.
And again, various kind of lids and attachments for the lids.
Yeah, I love those locking lids. And you can even if you don't want clear totes, you can see like these behind us right here. These have clear lids on them, which, at least you can see down into what's in them, but it still kind of hides some of your stuff. So that's a great option as well. If you don't want to see everything, you can get them with clear lids. And these in particular are kind of my favorite, these husky ones behind me, because these, you can actually open the lids sideways, right? So instead of having to take the whole lid off, I could just kind of crack the lid, lift it up, and pull stuff out from inside of it, which I think is a really great feature for these.
Yeah, the cool thing about that, the ones on the skinny side of the tote, they lock in place and lock the lid. The others lock as well, but if you undo all of the ones except the ones on one of the longer sides, like Robin said, it turns into a hinge, so you can just open it without taking the whole lid off.
Right. And this can help really keep all of your stuff organized. The totes are great because they're a lot more durable than cardboard, and they're also going to keep that moisture out. Even if your garage is totally dry, you're still going to get moisture that's going to invade that cardboard, which eventually could lead to musty odors or mold
or bugs
or
like
dust.
Burrow in there.
Yeah. So a lot of bugs like to eat cardboard.
Right.
So when you have these plastic shelves, it avoids all of that. It keeps out all of that moisture. It keeps out all of those dust. It keeps out all of the bugs and other little things that may crawl into your storage boxes.
Because we've all had boxes, cardboard boxes that we open up, and our stuff's in there, but there's some other things in there as well, like critters and bugs. These lockable lids, it's going to be a lot tougher for them to get in there.
Exactly. So these are really great features. And this is probably one of the biggest things. The thing that I really like about them too is that sheer variety of size. You can get everything from, 4 feet, 5 feet long, all the way up to small, even shoebox size, to kind of arrange and organize your stuff. And this is so important when you are kind of defining that space and going through all of your stuff. One of the things that you can do is group like things together. What makes sense to store together, right? Are you going to put all of your painting supplies in one place? Well, put them all together on the ground and you can kind of get a visual of what size bin you would need. Then you can get the right size bin, label it painting supplies, and everything is in one spot. So when you're going to look for that new roller, when you're going to paint your dining room, you know exactly where to go to get it. So that's a great feature as well.
Now, there are some systems that are kind of a combination of some of the different systems that we talked about. And a great example is this Milwaukee pack-out system, which is really cool for a couple of reasons. First of all, it is sort of a wall-mounted system. It's not on a track. You actually connect this back piece to the wall itself. You can obviously add to it as needed. But the cool thing, there are actual storage bins that can also hang from this. So while those are storage units that you can take around, carry to the job site or whatever is needed, they can also hang on the system. But the thing that makes these kind of unique is you can open them from the side. So if you've got them hanging on this system on the wall, you don't have to take them down and open them and go through them like you would if it was just a regular storage bin on a shelf. You can actually leave that hanging on the system and open the side and access what's inside. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, this pack out system just because it has so many different types and sizes that you can group like things together. And like you said, you can use it not even just for storing tools and stuff like that. Think about like maybe fishing equipment, fishing lures, things like that. They have all different packs that you could put them all together, stack them up on one of the weaving carts, and then go out on a fishing trip or a camping trip. Or I'll tell you something that I used to do. I used to craft a lot and I used to rubber stamp a lot. And we used to go to conventions and I had rolling toolboxes that I would put all of my crafting supplies in. It kept them dry. It kept them dust free. It kept them safe. And I could just mix and match and stack them all up, and I wheel everything in for a weekend of crafting. So it's a great way to use it.
It's funny you said it because, we live in Atlanta, and Atlanta is a big movie and television productions hub now. I've got a friend who's a makeup artist. She does the same thing. She couldn't find any kind of a makeup bin that held all of the stuff that she needed. She actually uses a Husky tool chest that's on wheels that has a million different compartments, and she puts all her makeup stuff in there. So again, versatility. You can use these things for anything.
Exactly. I know we're talking garage storage, but hey, if you were doing something like makeup and you had a closet inside, you could hang these racks inside as well in a laundry room or a utility room.
Right.
If you wanted something that was a little more climate controlled, and pop those pieces on it and take them off and mix and match them as you need them. So that's really great as well. So we covered a lot of stuff today, right? So we really talked about defining that space. That's the first key part of garage organization, is really deciding how you want to use the space, laying it out, making sure that everything you want to do in your garage, you can make fit, right? Then we talked about all different types of storage solutions, things that will fit everybody's space and budget, right? Don't forget, a lot of these are expandable. Start small, live with it for a little while, and then expand out into other things. We talked about how to install them, right? Rack systems, really easy. Don't forget to look for those studs, right? You've got to be in a nice, solid base in order to hang any of these units. And then finally, organization. How are you going to organize it? You can use all kinds of bins, totes, specialty features. There's something out there for everything.
And the one other note we would share is don't feel overwhelmed.
No.
Because these systems are so great at being able to be expanded upon and grown over time, don't feel like you have to have all the answers. You don't have to have a complete idea of what the garage is going to be at some point. Because you can get overwhelmed thinking, I just don't know, so I don't do anything. Well, start small. Start small. Maybe as you declutter and start to get organized and you see obvious, chunks of stuff. Like I had a ton of sporting stuff. Let me look for solutions that make sense for that. And then I can kind of build on it. So don't feel overwhelmed. You can start small, but you can build it into whatever you need it to be long term.
And don't feel odd about mixing and matching.
Absolutely.
Right? So if you start with one unit and it works for your sporting equipment, but then you're looking at another area like garden storage or something like that, and you go, oh, that's not really going to work. Look at something different. Go ahead and mix and match. It's your garage. Make it what you want it to be.
And the other point, sometimes it's hard to get organized. The more clutter you have, the more stuff you have, the harder it is to work through the process of what do I need to keep and how am I going to divide it up. But know this, once you get organized, it's easy to stay organized because everything has a place. You know that this broom goes here. You know that the weed eater goes over here. You put it back there when you're done, and it helps you stay organized. So if you're stuck getting through that initial process, get through it, because once you're through it, it will be easier to stay organized long term.
And that honestly is going to save you time and money, because how many times have you gone out to find something like that paint roller and you can't find it, so you go out and buy another one, and then a week later you find the first one that you had? So staying organized is going to save you not only time, but money in the long run as well.
I was just going to say that because I've actually done that. I know I have one somewhere, but I couldn't tell you where it is.
Couldn't find it. All right. So the last thing that we have to really do today is thank you. We want to thank you so much for spending time with us. And on behalf of Mike, myself, and the entire Workshops Live team, thank you so much for joining us today. And we hope that we've given you a little bit of insight to get your garage organized and looking neat.
And thank you for shopping at the Home Depot.